The good news is that if you have not, if you have done Latin before, the beginning of this book is going to be quite easy, which is never a bad thing, I feel like. But the good news, if you have not done any Latin before, is that it starts very gently and slowly, and so that's also not a bad thing. And as those of you who have any experience of Latin know, a lot of Latin words came straight into English, and if you know English, which you all do, obviously, you can pretty much figure out what a lot of Latin words mean without having to spend a lot of time memorizing. So your book, I want to just kind of walk you through the book, and also your parents or you have been sent a link to a Google Drive that has a workbook. Okay, and let's just start by going through the book and seeing how it's laid out. How many of you have used this book before? Isabella, you used this book before, right?
No, we used a different curriculum.
Oh, okay. So this is new to all of you. Is that correct? Okay, awesome. Let's just look in, and let's open up to the beginning to chapter 1. Today we're going to take a look at chapters 1 and chapter 2, but chapter 1, I'm just going to tell you flat out, is not very important to me. So we're just going to skim over chapter 1 and concentrate more on chapter 2. And John, you remember from Amori Press how there was a saying and everything. This one has a saying. You're also going to find out they're going to give you a lot fewer words to memorize each week. And the workbook is much better. Okay. Maybe not as much repetition, but so the beginning of every chapter in Latin Live has a saying. And a lot of the sayings are from state mottos, or in this case, the motto on our seal, E pluribus unum, one out of many. Because we came here from all over the world to America and made one people, right? And when we fought the Revolutionary War, we took all the colonies and made them into one country. And so we are one out of many, which you probably also know is on our coins. So every week there is going to be a saying. Let's try to memorize the sayings. All right, it's pretty easy. See, he was made to memorize sayings last year. How many of you already knew E pluribus unum meant one out of many? Right, it's already good. But a lot of people already, it's not hard to memorize. So let's work on memorizing E pluribus unum. How do you memorize something? What's your method?
Well, apparently last year you just write it down 2 million times.
Yeah, you write it down 2 million. 2 million might not be necessary, but many times say it and write it out several times a day, and before when a week passes, you know it. I'm working on learning the Lord's Prayer in Greek currently, and I'm just memorizing a little snippet, and then I have the paper laid out on my coffee table, and when I walk through, I just do it again. Do you know what I mean? That's my method. I don't really know another method, but having it out where you can see it is good. I am going to ask you, I already told your parents this, and don't panic if you don't have this at home right now, but I said it would be really nice to have 3x5 index cards and just to write the words you're memorizing on them. Write the Latin on one side and the English on the other. But you could do that with the sayings too. You could have a little pile of sayings, right? So every chapter has a saying. And then they have the meat, the heart, whatever the lesson is. And then turn the page for me. You will see, look at the bottom of page 2. Don't worry about the charts and everything right now, okay? But do you see where it says exercise 1? At the bottom, everybody see that? And there's a bunch of words. And then at the bottom of page 3, it says exercise 2. Everybody see that? Well, I I told you that there's a workbook, right, that you can have. And actually, I printed out, everybody take one of these. I guess I should have just handed them to you. And then I'm going to send one home for Preston. But, so let me just give them both to you. So this is what the workbook, I'm not going to print these out for you every week, but you can at home, it's just a link. You just click on it, it comes up on your computer. If you want to print it out, awesome. If you want to just get a notebook and sit in front of your computer and do it, and just write it on a piece of paper, that's fine too, okay? Not everybody wants to print things out. I've got a question look on your face. Do you have a question?
I'm not quite following what you're saying.
Okay, so you have this book, okay? And then also online, there's a workbook that goes with it. And it's got 490 pages or something like that. That was a lot to print out. So I sent your mom a place where you can go on the computer and you can click it and it takes you to the workbook. The workbook just comes up on the screen for you. And then you can just scroll down. You can print out the pages that you want to use this week, if you want to, like I did. Or you can just get a piece of notebook paper and you can look at the screen and use it. But Luke, also, you don't have to use the workbook at all. Did everybody hear this? You don't have to use the workbook at all. If you don't like it and you don't want to, it's just extra practice. Because here's what I wanted to show you. Look at the paper I just gave you. This is the workbook. I'm sorry, this is going to sound very confusing the first day This is probably the most confusing thing we're going to talk about all day. All right, if it makes you feel any better, this is as bad as it gets right here. Look at the bottom of page 2 in your book and look at the bottom of this sheet I just gave you. Do you see how they're exactly the same? Exercise 1. It's the same thing that's in your book. And Luke's frown now says, then why do we have a workbook if it's the same thing? I will tell you. Turn to, just a second, let me find one. Turn in your textbook to page 6. All right, kind of towards the top of the page it says exercise 5. Does everybody see exercise 5? Now, turn to page 3 of this thing. And there's page numbers at the bottom, in case you're wondering, okay? And find on this thing, the workbook thing, where it says exercise 5. Does everybody see exercise 5? Put them side by side. Do you see how in your book there are 8 words? And in the workbook there are the same 8 words, and then they gave you 4 more? Does everybody see that? Let me, let's make sure everybody's following. Here's exercise 5 in the book, and they've given you 8 words. Here's exercise 5 in the workbook. They've given you the same 8 words, and then there's a shadowy place, and it's got 4 extra words. It's extra practice. That's all the workbook has. It's extra practice. If you don't want to use the workbook, on the workbook, all right? Don't need to use the workbook. If you feel like you could use extra practice, you can use the workbook. But guess what? Everything that's in here is in the workbook. You don't do them both. Do you see what I mean? You get to choose. And so Luke, if you don't like this whole workbook thing and doing it on the computer, just forget I ever mentioned it. You're fine. Do you understand? You don't need to worry about it. But if you say, I don't know, I'd like all the practice I can get because I want to really work hard at this, or I have trouble learning new things and memorizing, and I want extra work, then use the workbook. Now, does what I've said make sense to everybody? Okay, are you good? Ava?
Yep.
You don't have to use the workbook. It's optional. But if you do like the workbook, you don't have to do the exercises in here. But I'll tell you one nice thing the workbook does. It divides it up by days. Day 1, do all this stuff. Then if you flip it, day 2, do all this stuff. Day 3, do this. Day 4, do this. Why only 4 days? Because we meet on the 5th day. It divides it up for you. All right? So Luke, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move on, but when we get to the end, I'm going to sit down and show you, just the two of us, okay? All right? So don't worry about that. If a question arises for you, this is what makes the workbook nice, because it tells you what to do each day. If you wonder, well, should I divide this up over a week? They did it for you, and you don't have to think about it. Also, the workbook has answers in the back. However, it does not have all the answers. It only has the answers for the shaded extra ones, because the other ones we're going to talk about in class. All right? So you won't lose anything if you don't use the workbook, but it does divide it up for you nice and neatly. So let's visit that again at the end, because I want to get into the meat of the lesson. But I'll go over this one more time. But let's go back to your lesson. Chapter 1 is a chapter all about the Latin language. What is the alphabet? How do you divide words into syllables? Where do you put the accent on words? I'm just going to tell you flat out that I don't care about these things very much, all right? I don't care if you don't do any of day 1, okay, of the exercises. If you are going to become a Latin scholar and scan Latin poetry for meter, then you should learn those. But right now, I don't think any of us are going to do that. And I think it's okay not to. A couple of interesting things, though, and let's go back to page 2 in your textbook there. You see charts. Now let's look at those charts. They basically tell you how to pronounce the letters. Most of them are what you would think. Our first chart on page 2 has the letter A. Can be like ah or The letter E is like or a. The letter I is like I or E. The letter O is like O or ah. The letter U is like or oo. And Y, just like in English, sometimes it has an I sound or an E sound when it's being a vowel. Now here's why I'm not going to ask you to sit down and memorize all of this, because I'm going to tell you how to pronounce every word we learn. And eventually you'll just know how to pronounce them for yourself, okay? Words like, let's look at exercise 1. Pater, mater, sino. Oh, now I have to talk about the V. Siwi. This is my favorite part of Latin. V's make a W sound. They did not have a W. There's no W in Latin. And their V's make a W sound. So it's so fun because every time I say V, I say Siwi. Ordo. Patior. Are all these kind of I mean, I think you could have pronounced these on your own. Est, aist, uxor, usus, syllaba, sica, punta. Now look at 7 and 8. Est and aist. What's the difference between those two words? But when you look at those two words in Latin, what's the difference?
The 8 one has a...
The 8 one has a little line over the E, doesn't it? This is called a macron. I'm just going to say macron. And many of these words had them. And I'm just going to tell you, I am not going to make you put these on these words, except for a few of them. There are a few that are vitally important. And if one is vitally important, I will say, you got to have it here. Otherwise, you don't need it. I discovered, I spent the summer, it makes me sound very boring, reading through Caesar's Gallic Wars in Latin, and now I'm working on the Aeneid in Latin. And you know that I downloaded off the computer, offline, there's none of the little marks. Not even the ones that I told you, you know, the A, the ablative A and first declension. It doesn't even have those. I don't even know if it's the subject or the object of the preposition. There's none of them. So if you pick up a Latin book someday, you know, you've taken Latin for years and you pick up a book, it's probably not going to have the marks in there anyway. So I'm not going to make you learn them unless it's really important for the okay? Look at the chart on page 3. A couple of interesting things. The letter C is always K. And by the way, John, I'm switching over. We're doing classical pronunciation. If you're Catholic and you go to Catholic Mass, you may hear a different pronunciation, but it's classical all the way for me now. C always sounds like K. So, canto, cana. G always sounds like G, never like G in gentle. You know, it's always a hard G. And then they note the V. V sounds like W as in wine. Oh, an interesting thing at the bottom of that page. TH. How do we pronounce TH in English? Like, say this word.
Theater.
Theater. We do a thing, right? I did it with thing again. They don't do that in Latin. Theatre. Theatre. If there's no put two consonants together. But you know, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because I'm not going to ask you to speak Latin in this class. Right? If I ask you to read a word in Latin, you do your best, all right? And I will correct you. So don't worry about it too much, please. Let's see how much time. Oh, no, we are. So here's what I would like you to do. I would like you to read chapter 1 to yourself at home. It is very easy. It is all about Marcus, who wants to learn English, and how hard English would be for Marcus, our little Roman boy, to learn. Because English is so weird. We have weird rules, you know, and words that get pronounced different ways depending on the context. We have letters that make all sorts of different sounds, like CH. Church, choir. Is there none? There's no other CH, is there? Ch and K.
I don't think so.
Can sometimes be, you know, there are, can be, or it can be like them, the ones that make your tongue tickle a little bit. Latin doesn't do that, all right? But I'm going to pronounce every word for you. So, assignment number 1, just read chapter 1. Just read through it, and then don't worry about it too much, okay? All right? Chapter 2 is where we really get into, oh, just a second. At the end, they like to do fun things, because you want to have fun, right? There should be fun. John's like, no, there's no fun. And page 8, they have a page that I will have you read about Roman names. And they guide you through, maybe you would like to give yourself a Roman name. You go for that if you want to give yourself a Roman name. I will even try to use it in class. You tell me what it is. And they have a list on page 9 of names that actually come from Latin, common names today. Okay. But chapter 1 is, I just want you to read over it and know that these things exist. And that's good enough for me. And if you're using the workbook, that is all of day one. For day one, read chapter 1 and just think about, okay, how are these things pronounced, okay? But I'll pronounce all the vocabulary words for you. Okay, chapter 2. We have another saying. Oh, but you can only e pluribus unum. Our new saying is on the back side of the Great Seal of the United States. Annuit coeptus. Annuit coeptus. He has favored our undertakings. I have a little explanation of that weird eye and pyramid. It says in my book that the pyramid is the symbol of strength. The eye over the pyramid and the motto Annuit coeptis refer to the interposition of God on behalf of the American cause. The date in Roman numerals is 1776, and the words Novus Ordo Seclorum, New Order of the Ages, refer to the beginning of a new American era. We have Latin all over our money and our seal, our federal buildings. It's all over the place. So, Annuit coeptus. He has favored our undertakings. Okay, let's talk about Latin in earnest. First, we're going to talk about verbs. What is a verb? What does a verb do?
It like tells action.
Tells action, exactly, thank you. It's an action word. Tells what you're doing. And in English, I'm just going to pick. See, I'm going to block the board for Preston and Isabella in the future. Love, all right? We have two forms, if you think about it, of the word love. Sometimes we say love and sometimes we say loves. I'm going to write out our pronouns. I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. Which ones can I use love with? Actually, it would be easier to ask you which ones do I use loves with. Sometimes I use love and sometimes I use loves. And you just naturally already know this. This isn't a hard question. What do I say? They loves? Is that correct? I loves? You loves? We loves?
Third person singular.
He, she, or it loves. If I say I love. You ever notice that? That magically this word changes and you just know it. You just grow up, you're little and you learn English and you hear people talking around you and you just suddenly know that we don't say we loves, except if you're maybe 2, right? We loves pizza. Or your Gollum. Then you use it that way. But normal big Gollum is not normal. I think I can say that. I imply 2-year-olds are normal. We all know naturally that the word changes. When we change the ending of a word like that, we say it's inflected. This is a fancy word that you will meet again in this book, but it just means we change the endings. That's all that word means. English is not very inflected. We don't really change the endings very much, do we? Latin is very inflected. The endings change all over the place. And the endings give you important information. So even in English though, this gave us information, right? If I just wrote the word love, you automatically know you can't use he, she, or it. You know, if I wrote the word love, and who's doing it? Well, it can't be a he, she, or it, because if it was, we'd say loves. Latin gives us way more information than that about the subject, though. So, Latin verbs Well, first of all, let's look at English verbs. You may have had a grammar course that did this. Let's just use love because it's a short word. We call them principal parts. They are all the parts of a verb that you have to know to use the verb. Here's and we usually do it like this. Love, we usually say, I love, I loved, I have loved, I am loving. Love, loved, have loved, am loving. Did you ever have a grammar thing where you had to memorize that? My kids use Shirley Grammar, okay. Carry, carried, has carried, is carrying. Those are the forms. And why do we do that? Because some of them are wacky. I ran, I run, I ran, I have run, I am running. Where's the ED? It's gone. There's no ED. Words like lie and lay and sit and set that cause us trouble in English. Sometimes we have to memorize those. You know, weird, because hang, I use a lot of violent. Do I use a lot of violent examples? Do you think I'm a violent example sort of person? For some reason, I'm like, hanging people. Okay, it's the first thing that comes to mind. So like hanging a picture on the wall. It's, I hang the picture, I hung the picture, I have hung the picture, I am hanging the picture. But when you hang people by the neck, you know, to kill them, you say hanged. I hang the criminal. I hanged the criminal. I have hanged the criminal. I am hanging the criminal. They're different. The different meanings of hang have different principal parts. Okay. So I'm only telling you this to show you that English actually has principal parts. If we want to know how to do the past tense, again, if we're 2 years old, or maybe Gollum, you know, I runned all the way down the street. Don't they say runned? Little kids say runned because they don't know ran. And it should be runned. In defense of the little child, it should be runned. It's not. I'm sorry, 2-year-old. You're in for a rude awakening of the weirdness of, oh, I didn't memorize that. English also, or Latin also has principal parts. And I will give you your first bad news. You have to memorize them. You have to know them. Okay? And the first one, let's use love. Amo. Amare. Amawi. They say or us. Okay, they do in this book. Amatum. Amo, Amari, Amawi, Amatum. This word means love in Latin. Okay, I'm sorry. This is. If I scoot it over, is that better for you? Do you want to move your chair? Do you want to sit on the other side?
No, I think
Okay. You cannot just learn that the word amo means love. You need to learn that amo, amari, amawi, amatum means love. Now, what the heck are these words? I'll tell you. This is just the form that means I love. Easy enough. This form is what we call in English the infinitive. Have you ever heard in your English grammar of an infinitive? It's okay if you haven't. An infinitive is when we say to do something, to love. For example, we use it all the time. I love to ski. I love to eat cookies. I love to bake. I love to drive. Sometimes when we use the word ought, it comes up. I ought to wash dishes. I ought to study. I ought to do the laundry. I ought. We never say I ought to eat ice cream, though, do we? It's always something bad we ought to do. So whenever we say to do something, that's an infinitive. What's the second part? The third is a past tense. I loved. And the last one is just loved like an adjective. A loved pet, right? We need to learn those. That's the bad news. Here's the good news. Look on page 10. There's only 5 of them, and they all are the same. Look at the principal parts. Once you learn how one of them works, you learned how all of them work. Let's look at them. Amo, amari, amawi, amatum means love or like. We get the English word amorous. If you're amorous, you're very loving. Comes from amo. Canto, cantare, cantavi, cantatum. Sing. Like a chant or a cantata. Comes from that word. Laboro, laborare, laboravi, laboratum. Means work. That's super easy because it looks like labor. This one's the funnest one to say with the wa. Now we go, now we gari, now we gawi, now we got him. Isn't that fun? If we have time, I'll tell you something my kids used to do funny with that. It means sail. We get navigate from that word, navigation. It looks like the word navigate. Opugno. Notice how I instead of opugno, some people do it that way, but a lot of times they like to pronounce it like lasagna. You know, have you ever noticed the crazy word lasagna? It's not lasagna. Lasagna. But if you say opugno, it's fine. Opugno, opugnari, opugnawi, opugnatum means attack. Pugnacious means you just like to fight all the time. Right? Notice how they're all the same, right? O, Ari, Awi, Autumn. After you learn one, you've learned them all. This week, he knows I'm kind of lying to you a little bit, but for right now, this is your second job this week. Memorize these 5 words. And don't just learn that work is laboro. It's laboro, laborari, laborawi, laboratum, right? Here's what I would do. I would take those index cards I was talking about, and I would write this on one side and love on the other side in English. And then I would go through them until I knew, I looked at the Latin and I knew what the English was. Then I'd flip them over and I'd see if I could look at the one that says sing and come up with canto, cantari, cantavi, cantatum. It's 5 words. Right? If you did that 4 or 5 times a day, which would take you about 2 minutes, I mean, if you do 4 or 5 times, you could probably do it in 2 minutes. You will know this by the end of the week. No question. All right. One other little word, known. Known means not. Because we've said I love, but maybe I don't love. Some things I don't love. I'm just going to say it. And so I need to be able to say not. I don't sing. I don't work. I don't sail. In case I want to say that. Does that make sense to everybody? What I've said so far. All right. This is going to be the hardest day, guys, because this is a brand new book and it's a brand new group and we're starting from ground zero and we only have a certain amount of time. Okay. So don't leave and say, oh, this is going to be a hard class. No, it's not. Not if you just do what I ask you to do. Go home and memorize those words. Right? And you'll be good. But there's one more thing to do. Okay? And it is to talk about the endings. All right? On page 12, at the top of page 12, you will see a very odd-looking chart. All right? And written in the chart are the words amo, amos, amat, amamus, amatus, amant. This is how to say love with all those pronouns that I showed you before. I'm gonna write them off to the side, okay? I love, you love, he, she, or it loves, we love, y'all love, more than one you, they love. And they have your little chart divided, fun like this, because you'll notice it has 2 columns. Everything on this side is singular. Think about it. I, you, if I'm just talking to one you, he, she, or it, those are all singular, aren't they? Those are all just one person I'm talking to. But we, or y'all, or they, that's all plural, isn't it? So that's the first thing they do when they write a verb like this in 2 columns. They say, these are all the singulars, these are all the plurals. Now, I think it's fabulous that there's a y'all, and it's totally fine to say y'all. I went to South Carolina this summer, and they y'all down there, you know, in the South. And we don't really in the North, and we think it's kind of Southern or low class or I don't know. But we don't have a you. That when I say you, if I just stand here and stare out the window and say, would you go into the living room? See, you have no idea. Do I mean all of you? Do I mean one of you? Unless I look straight at one of you. Or I make a motion with my hand. Would you go into the living room? In Latin, they actually have an ending that means all of you, and an ending that means just one you, which is kind of cool. I wish English had that. And y'all in the South is as close as we get to that. Do you see what changes on these words? Do you see how there's an S, and then a T, and then a mus, and then a tis, and then an unt? Do you see that change? It's stuck onto the same word. Travel with me to the infinitive. And take away the RE. And look at that. Ama. That's the stem. Ama, 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 ama. And then I just slap an ending on it. And the ending that I slap on tells you who's doing it. So the cool thing in Latin is I can write a whole sentence with one word. Amant, they love. Done. It's a complete sentence. It has a subject and a verb. I can translate it, they love. They are loving. And they do love. Those are all okay. Those all are present tense, which means it's happening right now. Does that make sense to everybody? Are you okay with that? This word, all 3 of these things. This word means all 3 of these things. And you just choose whichever one you like best. Okay? So I can do this to any, I guess I don't need to worry till other people actually start coming. I can do this to the other, whoa, I missed something. I didn't do the edge here. So we have singular and plural. And then what we have, what they like to call person. First person, second person, third person. So first person is I or we. It's I'm talking to you. This is first person. We're having a private conversation, right? Nobody has to know. Just go away. It's first person. Second person is I'm talking directly to somebody, right? Third person is those people are talking to each other and I'm not involved. So we have first person, I, we. Second person, you or y'all. Third person, those people over there, he, she, it, they. So whenever we name one of these, we use the person and the number. So this is like a science chart, or like a math chart where you bring the two columns together. What is, you don't answer, what is third person singular? Find the box that's by third person and is singular. Which box would that be?
Amount.
Amount. Because see, it's third person and it's singular. Amount. What's first person plural? Amomus. Because it's first person plural. Do you get the way it works? This will become very normal to you as the year goes on. It's not it doesn't seem normal today. It doesn't need to seem normal today, okay? But you see how it works. Like this is singular and plural. This is first, second, and third person. We talk about books sometimes that way. We say, this book was written in the first person, which means the author of the book used the word I. And the author of the book was the speaker. Sometimes we say that book was written in the third person, which means the author uses he, she, it, they, which is most books, I think. Just really likes to rattle. I'm just going to let it rattle. I'm trying to be all delicate so it doesn't rattle. So I can do the same thing with one of our other words. Let's do canto. Canto, and our cantare is our infinitive. I'm taking that away. I see my stem. Canto. I'm going to write my stem with my ending. Cantas, cantat, cantamus, cantatus, cantant. I sing, you sing, he, she, or it sings, we sing, you all sing, they sing. Does that make sense? I can do it with laboro. Laboro, laboras, laborat. Laboramus, laboratus, laborant. I work, you work, he, she, or it works, we work, you all work, they work. Opunyo. Opunyo, opunias, opuniat. Opuniamus, opuniatus, opuniat. Sorry. I attack, you attack, he, she, or it attacks, we attack, y'all attack, they attack. I just keep adding the same endings to the stem. I just pick a different verb if I want it to mean something different. Are you okay? That is the second chapter. That is the second chapter that we're going to work on. You have 5 words to memorize. And John, this will be, or anybody, if you've had Latin before at all, this will be really very, very easy for you, obviously. Here it is, you just go in the living room. So I would like you this week to read chapter 1, but don't worry too much about it, okay? If it makes sense to you, awesome. If the whole thing about dividing into syllables becomes tiresome, just forget about it. Don't do any of the exercises for chapter 1. No, if you're using the workbook, day 1 is out. Day 1 is reading that chapter. On day 2, you can turn to the workbook where it says day 2. This is on page 4 in the workbook. And here's what I would do if I were you. I have basically explained everything that's in here. There's a few terms, like I forgot to tell you what a conjugation was. A conjugation is a group of verbs who all do the same thing. But here's what I would do. I would open up to chapter 2, and I would just read over it. I'd work on my words again. It says exercise 1. Use the rules for syllabication that you learned. And I will remember, Mrs. Ferguson said we're not doing that, so I'm skipping that. And I would just read. I would read about the principal parts and what they talk about, and I would read all the way till I get down to exercise 2. And it says, following the examples, find the stem for each of the verbs. And that was easy, because I told you how, but they're going to tell you how here. You're going to say, oh, I remember what she told us to do. Go to the second principal part and take away the RE, there's a sum. So then my workbook says, oh, that says syllabication and accents. We're not doing that. Then I would keep reading. Chapter 2, exercise 2, find the stem. We just did that. And then there's only one more thing on day 2. They have derivatives. It means English words that come from Latin. They're probably the words that they gave you in the book. It says another word for romantic is, and then they tell you it comes from amo. Well, it's right in your book, amorous. A blank is a musical piece sung by a chorus. The word cantata is right there in your book. Do you see how the words are all going to be in your book? Well, yeah, give me just a moment. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
And work your way through. And then, since that's the end of day 2, I'd stop for that day. Go over my words one more time and be done. Day 3, I just pick up where I left off. And just work your way through the exercises in the book and or the exercises in the workbook. Now, on page 14 in this book, there's a fun little exercise, learning to, it says I Latin. Figuring out what it means because it looks so doggone much like an English word, you can figure it out without knowing Latin. Cuius est numeri, what number is it? Singulariter est, pluraliter est. What do you think those mean?
It's singular.
It's singular or it's plural, exactly. Or down below, what is the person? Est primae personae, est secundae personae, est tertiae personae. It's first person, it's second person, it's third person. This is not hard, all right? And they have some of those in the workbook. Here's what I need you to do for me. I need you to take this week with an open mind, not worry too much about if you get into the workbook and you say, I'm not sure how this works, I don't know how this comes together. Because this is your trial run week, okay? And come back and say, Mrs. Ferguson, I didn't know what they wanted me to, I didn't know I lost my place and I wasn't sure, and we'll deal with it. But if all you do for me this week is you learn those 5 words, and you learn how to do this with them, memorize this. Amo, amas, amat, amams, amatis, amat. I love, you love, he, she, or it loves, we love, you all love, they love. If you come back here and you have learned that, you're fine, okay? Whether you get every exercise in the book done, or whether you get confused about the pages in the book, it's all fine. Are we okay with that? All right, don't worry about it. I have not taught out of this book before. I know what the stuff they're teaching, but I've read through it and everything, but I don't know what it's going to look like when I give you instructions and then you go home and look at it for yourself. So you be patient with me, and I'll be patient with you, but those are the important things. Memorize those 5 words both ways, so that if I say work, you say laboro, laborari, laboravi, laboratum. It's only 5. I bet you guys know every, like, Star Wars machine, or I bet there's some realm in which you have everything memorized. Whatever it is your hobby, I bet you know all the names of all the creatures and gadgets. So I know you can memorize it. And then be able to do this. There are exercises in the workbook that have you just basically do this. This is all you're doing this week. Okay? Do we feel good? Do you have any questions? There is no question that is a silly question. Right? I feel like once you go home and try it, then you will know what to ask. You see, you'll come back and say, the workbook is set up like this and I don't know what they want me to do, okay? And Luke, if you're not loving the whole workbook idea, it's okay, all right? But it is nice because it shows you what to do. You can just use it by look at day 2 and see which exercise they send you to. But remember what I said, if you use the workbook, you don't really have to do the exercises in the book because they're repeated in the workbook. The workbook just gives you a little extra, okay? All right, I will let you go if there are no questions, and I'll see you next week. And come with the questions. Tell me what it was like to work through the book, because I'm not a student and I don't know, and I need you to tell me, okay? So if you're staying for a high school class, you can go into the living room, and if not, I know Kate and your mom is here. I'll sign off.